with the president of the European Commission stating that prices will go up in Europe and in the United States because of these tariffs. Well, for more, let's go to Francesco Saraceno of the OFCE think tank, macroeconomics professor at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po, who joins us from Parma in Italy. Thanks for joining us here on France 24. We're going to have more inflation because of these tariffs. Now, that's if these tariffs happen, right? Because we're seeing that things move quickly.
Absolutely. I think it's impossible to be in Trump's mind right now, I think ever. But he seems to have in mind two different objectives. The first is to use tariff to repatriate production in the US. And that we know from tons of literature is not going to happen very easily. And anyway, that is some sort of an American problem. And the second reason why Trump is using, the second way Trump is using tariffs is as a form of geopolitical pressure. So he tries to put them on, then take off. There were people joking in the morning, there are tariffs, in the afternoon, there are no tariffs, etc. This also works somehow not so well because, other countries, of course, resist and retaliate. You heard that the Commission has announced new tariffs, China has announced new tariffs, Canada, we were just talking about it, is fighting back. And so that in the end will become a war in which it's not clear whether there will be winners. And on top of that, this sort of back and forth of tariffs is creating a huge uncertainty. And this huge uncertainty is certainly bad for the economy in the US and also elsewhere.
Investors are holding back. We saw in 2017 tariffs slapped and then the tariffs withdrawn.
Exactly. People. Put yourself in the shoes of an entrepreneur, and you need to decide where to open a new plant and where to open that new plant. Right now, it's impossible for you to make that choice. So people are waiting to see whether this whole tariff trade war that Trump has started will eventually end up like in 2018, because he tried that already during his first term, with a very moderate, in the end, increase of protection. If that happens, then of course, business will go on as usual. But as long as we don't know what will happen, firms simply do not invest and do not do anything. And consumers do not do anything. Would you buy a car now or wait for a few months to see what are the tariffs on it or what is the price, because there will be inflation, of course, that is imported through tariffs. So that is a situation of uncertainty that is certainly bad for the economy as a whole.
So Francesco, since you're on the other side of the Alps, I'll just fill you in on the French press this morning, the French business papers, very self-congratulatory over Europe choosing targeted sanctions aimed at Republican states. I'll give you examples. Beef and poultry from Kansas and Nebraska, wood products from Alabama and Georgia, bourbon from Kentucky. But is that self-congratulation a bit of hubris?
I don't know. It's hard to say. In 2018, that is exactly what they did. So they went and hit where the voters, Trump's voters are, and it worked, because this was much heavier in political. The cost of that was much heavier in political terms, and probably this clever way of targeting specific Republican states in imposing the tariffs was one of the reasons why Trump in the end backed down. The problem is that today Trump is much stronger and Europe is much weaker. So will it work this time too? That is, I'm not sure. But at least they're doing it in an intelligent way, which is already something. They're not just imposing tariffs across the board. Most of them would actually backfire and hit Europe more than the United States. This targeted tariff strategy certainly is more effective. How much it will eventually be in the end, that remains to be seen.
All right, and we heard the U.S. president in the company there. You saw the images of the Irish prime ministers in Washington ahead of St. Patrick's Day. And Donald Trump saying that, of course, I will respond to the latest tariff slapped on by the European Union. more broadly, taking a step away from the personality of the President of the United States, why does this period in history when globalization seems to be on steroids, that there is this move towards more tariffs? It's not just about one man's whim.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. There is, I mean, the ways are very different, but there is a certain continuity between the Biden administration and the Trump administration in putting America first, if you want, in refusing to play as much as we did before the multilateral game. I think there are many reasons for that. I mean, this is not just the United States. I mean, you see many European countries in which you have France first, Hungary first, Italy first. I mean, let's say, nationalistic sovereign movements are gaining ground everywhere. I think that this is very much related. We discussed that many times, even with you in the past. It's very much related to an increasing inequality and some sort of demise of the middle classes that are suffering, and so they look for solutions that seems to, at first sight, easier. We also know that most of the time populist movements do not actually bring the benefits to the people that they promise, but they end up making either everybody poorer or the rich richer at the expenses of the poor. I mean, once again, let's take this tariff thing. What the tariff is just a tax on imported goods, and this tax falls on the shoulders of the middle and lower classes much more than it falls on the shoulders of the upper classes. So if Trump uses the tariff revenues to lower taxes for big corporations, basically that will end up in a huge redistribution from the bottom to the top.
Francesco, during Donald Trump's first term in office, we knew that the U.S. president liked to look at the stock market and to see what it was doing. That was one of his barometers, if you will. The stock market is 10% off its highs in early February now at this point. It's on a downward trend. Is that going to mean we're going to go back to something more predictable soon?
That is a very good question. I wonder why he's so quiet about it, and he seems to be not worried about it. We shouldn't take the stock market as the alpha and the omega of the policy evaluation, but of course, I mean, the stock market, that's such a big correction of the stock market means that the business, it's a sort of vote of no confidence of the business world, and so eventually Trump will have to deal with that. We all saw him getting a Tesla from Elon Musk. It will take much more than buying one car to solve the problem that Tesla is having. So I mean, he will not, even for people who are less obsessed than him, it would not be possible to ignore this large correction forever, and for Trump even more so. So he will eventually have to address that.
One final question for you, Francesco, because this is all a 25% across the globe tariff on aluminum and steel. Now, the U.S. steel industry is applauding the measure, saying they need it. And steel is a tricky one because even when it's losing money, it is strategic, having your own steel industry. What is the right way forward when it comes to policy, when it comes to the issue of steel?
That is also a very, very, very good question, because it actually allows me to say something. I mean, tariffs should be considered, in general, protection should be considered along with many other elements as one of the possible tools you can use to push forward a fully fledged industrial policy. For example, the protection that Biden introduced with the IRA, with the Inflation Reduction Act, this huge industrial plan that he approved in 2022, was a protection that was targeted on sectors in which he wanted to actually reindustrialize the United States. But these protection came together with other tools of industrial policy, for example, subsidies, for example, demand pull measures, et cetera, et cetera. So if you use protection as one of the many tools that you want to use in a temporary way to restore some sort of power in strategic sectors. So you named steel. We could have the electric, for example, batteries and things like that. I mean, there is nothing bad about it. We go back to where we started. The fact is that Trump is not using them in this way. It's using them in a completely indiscriminate way, and you don't see the logic of that besides him using them as a weapon for geopolitical predominance, and that is not what they're supposed to be used for.
Francesco Saraceno, many thanks for joining us from Parma.
Thank you to you.